Sign something outside.
Is something better than nothing?
Having not,
Steve, how are you?
I think,
40B's coming.
what?
40B will be here.
Yeah, 48 didn't have to be there.
Planning board, why not? Come on. They had, have you been to any of the meetings? They had all the.
No,
Okay,
here's
so-
the thing. This is why I didn't come to the meeting. I mean, I haven't had time to be amazingly involved. From what I've heard from people that I trust, it seemed like a bad idea. I was passing that on.
You were misinformed.
Possibly.
The deep holes and the septic holes that were done for the 40A, were on record at the Board of Health, you look at them. So the 40A was coming also. Okay, the planning board tentatively agreed to the open space plan, their last vote. They're gonna vote it on, officially vote on it on Thursday. So that being said, 40B's coming, 40A's already been tentatively approved, independent of each other.
Okay,
So,
here's the thing. Limited brain power, I'm gonna try to focus on tonight. And it's not,
no, I'm just trying to inform you trying to inform you of what's real and not the murky, hazy stuff you see going around all the time in this town by that certain segment that you're talking about. And we all know what segments are.
what segment is it?
The Alex McCurry crowd.
Actually,
Okay? I'm just saying that's where it comes from. And that's who always shows up, and that's what spreads it. We saw it last night, we saw it the week before, and we saw it the first hearing. Same thing. Same thing.
Good, how are you? Okay, you saw my haircut?
All misinformation.
It's boring, right?
So whether or not that was from those folks, that's where I see the focus of misinformation coming out of.
I can live with it either way, but I gotta make
here's
it.
the thing, like I said, I haven't had time to be very involved.
I guess I'm only.
I
Yeah,
didn't,
there you go.
I think you guys got an email.
I'm just responding to that email.
Right, no, I know.
That's all, I'm just responding to that email.
No,
Special Fred now?
Actually, no, Fred is,
Florida?
no, he's back.
Interestingly, for the process, those who live furthest had the most to say.
Send me an email. I already heard
He's
from
gonna
Alan.
bother
Alan's not gonna be here. He's gonna pick up Bob.
Those who live
So I
furthest
told Fred, I said, yeah, you beat it.
had the most to say.
I'm assuming
And that's always appreciated.
Yeah.
It's like me coming up to kids now, and worry about what's on Coughlin Road.
Put a reminder into him too, I didn't hear
And
that.
having a very
I
strong voice.
actually have trouble with that line of reasoning because it's like saying, why should those people who don't have kids in the schools have anything to say about it?
I didn't mean to be.
I think you're in
I'm not
slippery
complaining.
ground.
It's a legitimate question.
Actually, no, because you don't have enough
She has a
information.
commitment that runs.
Trying to
all
help you gain some
success.
information. You go down the receipt goal, there'll help you a lot. And I know you understand just you transmit receipt.
Come on, Peter, have a
I
good
understand
meeting.
that, Paul. I understand that.
Work here.
What's happening? Last time you left your back to work.
Oh, man.
I gotta do that tonight.
Oh, man.
And as reward for all this, is you might get sequestered out of your job.
Oh, I will. So,
two successive joint meetings and then some other items after that. A lot of it obviously budget related, and the selectmen, the school committee, the finance committee have not met formally as a group since, I think it was, what was it, November? December, maybe? Yeah. In any event, we moved well along the budget cycle since then, and there are a few joint topics we'd like to address. One of which is Bonnie Halston will be making a presentation, a revenue update, which I think the schools, you had requested that be part of our agenda, and we're happy to do that. Good time for an update. We'll also cover the school department's budget capital requests, which we know you guys were good enough to forward us the slides from your meeting last Thursday. We look forward to that. And then there's some discussions we would like to follow up with on some of the shared resource issues, principally involving schools with highway and park and rec, to try to make some sense about how to deal with those best going forward. Then there's some joint selectmen finance committee topics which we will, which you're welcome to hang around for, obviously, school folks, but we have some items there to talk with the selectmen about, and then a couple of items of our own internal at the end. So without any further ado then, my intention was to start with the revenue projection which Bonnie's prepared to make, and then if you guys want to take the floor at that point, either way, to review this with us or just talk about it in general, I'm happy to do that. All right, okay, Mr. Chairman, with that?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. And who's our ranking member over there?
Would be me.
That'd be you, all right.
Would be
Yeah,
me.
Jim? Okay. How'd you become ranking?
Oh, you Clark, whatever it is.
Geez, we really are nobody.
He voted himself in.
He's got it easy, he hasn't been able to do any letter stuff. Write a letter yet or anything.
And Peter, until Marilyn gets here, could you please?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, what I wanted to do is kind of do a status of the budget and capital plan where we are right now, and focus in on the revenue component of it as there are a lot of questions about the projections being used. So the current status of the 2014 operating budget, we have a $39.6 million spending plan in draft form, and that includes capital. The structural deficit in fiscal 14 currently sits at $318,000, which is about a 1%, it's like 0.8% in deficit. We are monitoring various components that are still in flux. One of them is state aid, both on the town and the school side. We have level funding assumed in the documents, but we're not really sure where they're going to land. The governor's budget was a little bit more generous, but there are some projections within his budget that don't seem like they're going to maybe appear. So just to be conservative, we're going to focus on a level funding status right now. Health insurance costs, we have a projected 10% increase budgeted, and we've got additional charges for fire department staff that are also included. If we have a better claims experience and we receive a lower premium increase, then we'll recognize some savings in this area. But 10% is usually a good number to roll with. On the state assessments and charges, both on the town and the school side, we're assuming level expense. And this would be on the school side like choice out or charter out tuition. It would include transportation assessments on the town side, like for MART, and various other smaller charges. We're assuming new growth of $300,000, and again, this is based on a historical average, along with some review with the building inspector and our principal assessor, Ken Mildren, on projects that are coming close to being permitted, and with some projects coming online, this is going to be a focal point in the future. So, on the budget projections for revenues, the tax levy makes up 73.4% of this $39 million spending plan. So, it's a major component of it. In one way, we're somewhat fortunate because it provides a steadier income going forward. I mean, you know that you can count on 2.5%. The The state aid side is much more tough to predict because there are years where you have reduced state aid or the assessments go up so much higher than the state aid would go up that you end up bringing home less in the end. New growth estimates increases. We're making some projections, and again, these are very preliminary projections based on the Sam Park project and Omni, about $50 million in infrastructure improvements over the next few years. This is sort of what that might look like, and again, it just depends on when the construction goes into place and how it gets permitted. And 50 million is probably conservative. It also, depends on how it gets valued. Is it valued based on just the improvements that are made, or is it rental sales? So there's a couple of different methods in there that we need to flesh out. Once we get the final project designs in place, we'll have a better idea of where this is going to look. We are also assuming full utilization of the 2.5% increase allowed on the tax levy each year. That's $651,000 for this fiscal year. State aid is 12.1% of our fiscal spending plan. And we're assuming a level funded state aid. $652,000 is considered municipal aid. It's called general municipal aid. We've received about a 40% reduction in general municipal aid over the last 6 years. We used to be closer to $1 million. And on the school state aid, we're projecting $4.1 million, again, same level that we received in the last fiscal year. Local receipts. Local receipts make up 6.5% of the spending plan. This would include any of the building permits, motor vehicle excise, interest income. The changes that we're looking at for this fiscal year are building permit fees. We're increasing those based on discussions with Roland, our building inspector, and again with the projects that are coming online. So we pretty much doubled the projection for the next year. The addition of $60,000 in meal tax revenue. That is a new item. We adopted it effective January 1st. So we'll have a full fiscal year, and this $60,000 estimate is straight from the Department of Revenue, the Division of Local Services estimate. And we're assuming level funding on all other local receipts, excise fees, and everything else. Interest income is also, it's about $78,000. It's not much. Other revenue funding sources make up 7% of the spending plan. This would include the $500,000 in school reserves being assumed on spending, $842,000 in undesignated fund balance being used for capital, and $1 million for another available funds for operating budget and capital. And those include trust fund transfers, transfers from CPC funding for projects that are earmarked, transfers from CPC for previous year's debt service, the light department's debt service that we pay and they reimburse us for, any revolving fund transfers, like ambulance receipts that are used as part of the operating budget. So it might seem like a large number, but again, for the $1.4 million, they're used mostly for operating expenses. And this is what the revenue projections look like fiscal 13 through fiscal 18. You can see the other available funds changed quite a bit from fiscal 13 to fiscal 14. This was primarily because of capital. We had some capital expenditures in 13, for example, for the cable studio upgrades and the fire station upgrades that were transferred directly from revolving accounts that had the funding in there available. So it wasn't a levy impact. And it seems it'll be consistent, more consistent going forward.
You want to hold on one second?
Sure.
PJ, did you get the information you were primarily looking to get here?
Yeah, obviously a lot of it's curiosity. The bottom line's gonna be how much we're gonna get all together as a town, and how do we divvy it out across the town. But yeah, this is good, thank you to everybody else.
And if these guys haven't got it digitally, you can obviously send them
Yeah.
along. Yeah. Right. Stop with any
Yeah, some of
questions.
this stuff, you did provide us in some of this stuff you've already given us.
Yep.
Yeah.
This you don't have electronically, so I can email it out.
Yeah, not the specific brief.
So just to touch a little bit more on the expenses and the changes in the operating budget going forward, and what we're looking for. What we've got programmed in right now are the annual step increases that are due to the town employees. If they're due them, they're programmed in the 5-year projections. No COLA. We are factoring a 0% increase in town department expense budgets. For this fiscal year, we're factoring a 5% increase for the local school appropriation, and that's the $780,000 that I had referenced before. There's a big, salary increase that's due primarily because the teachers deferred the step increases in 13 into 14. So that's why this bump is needed to fund that operating expense. Level funding in fiscal 2015, and I know this is going to be something that's going to be discussed and worked on. The reason that it's just put in there as a holding place right now is because in fiscal 14, there's the fiscal impact of 3 steps. 2 of them are increases in base salary, and one of them is the lump sum payment for the step that was deferred in 13. So there's that $182,000 that's in 14 that is not going to be paid out lump sum again in 15. So I know it's a discussion point, and it's a starting point, so.
I understand your point, so it's okay.
And then 2.5% increase is built into the school department appropriation in the outgoing years. And again, that's just to get us where the projections are, and they're just projections. Other things that we're using in the operating budget is an average of 2.7 annual increase to the tech school assessment. And again, this is based on a 5-year rolling. Some years it's less, some years it's significantly more. There's a new item, it's a $40,000 tuition payment to Minuteman Tech. I did send this to Judith Quinquitz at the Neshoba Tech, just to let her know that there are students going out to Minuteman. Just as a comparison, Minuteman is the lowest assessment in technical schools in the state, and Minuteman is the highest.
Neshoba is.
I'm sorry, Neshoba is. Sorry.
Presentation.
So it's a huge difference. So for 2 students, it's about 19, almost 20,000 apiece. And they'll be in the 14 budget also. Increasing the OPEB funding per our funding plan by 10% each year. Again, this isn't getting us to where we need to be, but it's addressing, it in some level. Right now, we'd be at $650,000 next year. We should be funding $2.3 million, ideally, each year. But we do have an attempt to address it.
What are other towns doing with that same?
I talked to the auditor, and he said that it ranges across the state. He said there are some communities that just went ahead and funded it and did it. And those are the wealthier communities that can manage that. And then there are communities that are just hoping it goes away. And then he said that, there are communities, a growing number of communities like us that are trying to develop some type of plan to address it because it's becoming apparent that it's affecting the bond ratings, or it's going to affect the bond ratings going forward. So we're in a small group, but it's getting larger as far as communities trying to address it.
There was some talk about the state doing something to address this issue back in December. Did you hear anything formal on that?
No, nothing formal, nothing formal.
I don't think it's part of the governor's budget either.
Yeah.
There's nothing in there that I've seen for fiscal year 14 that help any of this.
Candy tax isn't dedicated to...
Well, no, that's going for roads and schools, infrastructure and schools.
The schools.
Well, there was a commission on OPEB which issued a report and which contains recommendations.
Is that what I was referring to, about December or so?
Yeah, but the recommendations essentially would set higher thresholds before you could qualify for the benefits. So it's not that they would, have any more funding available. They'd say, for example, in order to qualify for group health on retirement, you'd have to have 20 years in the system rather than 10 currently, therefore, reducing your exposure, but...
We've already made some moves in that direction anyway, right?
Well, the retirement reform has done some of that too.
We made some changes in
We made some,
2010.
yeah. Thank you, Keith.
One question, if I may, please, on that follow-up. First off, we do support, doing something with OPEB. And now, what should the something be? What kind of analysis we've done? Like you mentioned, maybe some towns have gone out at 100%, it's all funded, which, one side looks very, very good, and others hoping it goes away, don't agree with that. But there's opportunity cost. So like, if we went and funded, you go absurdum, if we funded the entire thing right now, there's so much we would not do in our town, we're unable to do. Have we done an analysis specific to Littleton as to what's the right number? So as we continue in 10%, that's the right number, it's good enough for right now, I should think. But at some point we go, maybe 75%, 65%, numbers out of the air, is what we should fund it to. And that's the right number for Littleton, so that we don't lose opportunity costs, so to speak.
We've asked that question, and I think it's fair to Bonnie, that this thing is recent enough in the town, that the state bring it to the town's attention, that we don't have a whole lot of examples to go by, so that's an ongoing process. The 10% that Bonnie's been plugging in, I mean, that chokes our budget in projected years. So I think what you're suggesting, I'm very much in favor of doing a more formal, thorough study of what's the best approach.
Yeah, we're certainly content with the effort as it is right now, but at some point, and...
There's nothing magic to the 10%, I guess is the bottom line.
The 10% increase, no, there's nothing magic to it. It was something.
Yeah, it's more like, well, gee, how much money do we have that we could put towards that obligation, but it's the last thing we think about, it's not the first thing.
Right.
But here's what I would ask then, is we look at working towards setting a target, and then, very consciously aim for it, and see how we do, and then adjust as each year goes by.
I think that's a fair approach, PJ, and if we haven't formally adopted that, we're kind of stumbling in that direction, but I think that's the...
Well, like you said, it's new enough, and,
Yeah. Darrell, you had a...
Yeah, on the first chart, the word structural deficit. Structurally, are we funding OPEB enough so that we're not further falling behind? Are we funding at a level so that the benefits are currently granting?
Every year we want to won't get steep.
The higher the healthcare costs go, the further behind you get for the future.
So until you start addressing the future cost of current benefits and the
Right.
level of benefits you're granting.
Which is part of the issue that
It's never gonna
the
fix
state is
itself.
looking at, by the idea of changing state law to say that, whole categories of people that would, qualify for a benefit now, the way the law is written, won't, once the law gets changed. That reduces our exposure, it also reduces their benefits, so. But that, the world around us is changing, is because the state is looking at changing what the fundamental rules are when you can qualify for these benefits.
If everyone's, wants to look at this a little bit further, I could ask our actuary to come in and have a meeting with the selectmen and the finance committee and explain exactly where we stand. She'd be more than willing to do it.
That might be good. We're hoping sometime in the next month to have the auditor in, so if we wanted to have the driest evening known to man. We'll have the actuary and the auditor the same night.
We'll cap it with school committee policy meeting.
I welcome that. There's nothing to be gained from pretending we're not dealing with a big issue here, and I think we all know that. So, it's an appropriate question, Darrell. The answer is no, that doesn't address the issue, but the cold comfort we take is that we're still doing better than a lot of the communities by being responsible.
But I think it's the point of that part of it is even by doing this, we're not really catching up. We're going to
not getting that far behind.
keep falling behind.
Of the group that we're in that is funding it at some level, we're on the high end. We should be proud of that. There are communities that are, putting 50,000 or 100,000, and I'm certainly not a proponent of that. We're putting in 600,000. It's
We're
how
doing
to
more
do
than
that.
Acton is.
Right,
And it's
we are
reflected
making
in
it
our bond rating because of that.
That's huge.
That's one of the big focal points that the rating agency looked at when they rated us this last time, is what you're playing with OPEB and
Right.
But I think, a session dedicated to that topic with the experts in the room is probably appropriate.
Protecting that bond rating is important to us too, we understand that. Protecting the bond rating, we understand.
And,
And interest rates are going to rebound someday.
Yeah, we had recent, what was it, last fall, we just got the, further good
Refund.
news from the bond rating folks, so everybody's doing a good job. All right, now move forward.
Sure. The other thing that's in there is additional staffing for the fire department. This is the 24-hour staffing model that Chief Wozinski presented. It's 2 firefighter EMTs on overnight in order to increase the response time from the average of 15 to 18 down to 3 to 6. And that is an additional $165,000 over the level staffing budget. So that's the only service enhancement on the town side that we have. We have continued funding of stabilization as needed to maintain 5% balance in the operating budget. It's about $4,200. It's not a big amount, but it's just to keep it at that 5% level. And again, this is just a summary snapshot of the operating budget for the last few years.
And again, projections, just that projections, they're not, nothing's voted, obviously.
But you can see the 318,000 in fiscal 14 going forward, you know, and again, it's just to kind of show you where the problem years are going to be, what we need to be monitoring. Okay, reserves. As again, the use is predicated by fiscal policy. We adopted them in February of 2010. This is where the stabilization funding comes into place, and it's 5% of the operating budget for the policy. So we built in an appropriation of $4,310 in fiscal 14 to keep us on target with that. And that'll have our projected balance at the end of 14 at $1.786 million, which again is 5% of the operating.
Thank you.
Anything in particular that wasn't covered there that you want to bring up?
Well, that was easy, thanks, good meeting.
Well, you're going to continue to make it easy, because we are in receipt of, of what you guys discussed. And did you vote something on, was it a vote on Thursday?
No, we won't vote till the 21st, and I was going to get to that here in a little bit. First, any questions? So I think keeping with where you set the agenda, you did receive what Mike and Kelly put together along with the budget subcommittee and all the buildings. So that's that input. That's that first rough draft, if you will, for public presentation that was at our last school committee meeting Thursday last week. Our next 2 meetings, 28 February and 14 March, between now and those meetings, and then in the intervening time between the 2 meetings, the budget subcommittee will continue working with the administration and refining it. In all candor, it's darn close right now. This is what we think we need to do and what we think is appropriate for the kids in the town. So, but the 14th, we'll have a full briefing in the school committee for the preparation for the public hearing on the 21st.
14th of
March, excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, so our next meeting is 28 February, 14 March, 21 March. With 21 March being that public hearing. So that's for folks, all the input that they'd like in. Help us, if we miss something, great, we'll work on that. But we do think the numbers are close, and we understand the revenues and the total town expenditures. And some of the things that are new this year, certainly we support also, specifically the fire department.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just good sense for our town, given the realities of today and our expectations. So working with all that, and now I guess we all got to just kind of figure out that 300 and change. So how do we whittle that down as a town? And certainly prepared to talk about some things. What we would like to highlight, though, is certainly, you're aware of the successes. I'm not going to go down a litany of that.
Well, this is a good opportunity. Remind us of some of that.
Okay, well, certainly, easy ones are very objective ones are standardized testing. Whether they're SATs, and an example of SATs, the SATs continue to go up. And I'll be candid with you, nowhere near the level I'd like to see them at, and nobody else, other school committee or the administration. They're not where we want them yet. But what's important about, not only are they going up, more kids are taking them. And when you get a larger part of the population take it, you'd expect actually that number to decrease, not to increase.
It's always a secret.
It's not the select.
Success. They scored great because nobody took it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the Rhodes Scholar took the test, and I was the only one, and got 2,400 for the 3 tests. We're certainly proud of that. You know about MCAS. Certainly the current 12th grade did very, very well while they were in the 10th grade. And soon we'll find out how the current 10th grade will have done. or actually they're 11th graders now, so, well, they've been here before long. We've had some international tests. You see how Massachusetts is generally, there was one standardized test given where Massachusetts, if it had been a country, and remind me, Kelly, because I'm forgetting, fourth is coming to mind.
That's right.
As a nation. So if Massachusetts tested as a nation, Massachusetts was fourth in the world on these particular tests. Most recently, we've had Representative Jen Benson, I think you know well. She came and spoke to us last Thursday evening also about Finland. Recently, just happened that same day actually, on NPR, there was quite a bit of a story about Finland and South Korea. Two polar opposites on how they approach education, and we won two. So, where's the right common ground? A lot of it's going to be cultural, obviously. So in the standardized test in Littleton specifically did well. We know about Bloomberg Newsweek, and Littleton, the best town this year in Massachusetts, in that 5 to 50K range to raise children. And the schools were a big part of that as to what they weighted and the facts. You can see that, and I think certainly anecdotally speaking to realtors, and very anecdotally, just Sunday morning, as I'm out walking around enjoying the beautiful weather after the heavy snowfall, cars driving around, a person just stopped, asked me about the neighborhood, certainly answering the questions. Then the question was, well, we're interested in the schools. Excuse me while I take this hat off. And certainly then, still not chairman of the school committee, and went on to speak to this family. And at that point, there was a toss-up between Westford and us. The folks told me at that point. So
Was it a house hunting in your neighborhood?
Yes.
You didn't tell them about the 40B, did you?
Actually, we're proud to have the 40B in our neighborhood. It's going to, instead of just woods in the background, we'll have now some nice architecture. Positive. What can I do? But back to the schools. We had no engineering not too many years ago. The engineering program's going well. The anecdotal evidence we're receiving from the kids who go off now into college, we have a person in this room whose son was very well prepared, as she and the son were able to tell us. That kind of narrows things down, doesn't it? When he started college, we just very recently, a young lady who's at an Ivy League school, comment back to the principal as to how well prepared, not she only felt, but her teachers and her peers, felt, you're really on the ball. God's truth is, the kid's smart. There's no two ways, your son's smart. So these kids are doing well, but they're prospering still, and we're preparing them well. That's the important thing. And that goes on and on. So we're definitely proud of that, and I know everybody in the room is, and everybody in town is. And how do we continue it? It's no free lunch, bottom of the pond. It is going to cost us some money. But you may recall a town meeting last May when I gave an analysis of the 66 surrounding towns. We really do well in hitting the target at the low end of costs per student, where our teacher salaries are, and then just in general across the board for all expenses. Tied for second on that 66. And they were cherry picked. 66 out of 351. Can't do too much cherry picking when I go around the area. And I actually left the big cities out because that would only elevate us in that number because of the difficulties they face. We're in the right direction. And I've used the term, you've heard me say this, we're in ascendancy. And we, certainly as the school committee administration, want to continue that. Because we think certainly socioeconomically we can support that in this town. Roughly speaking, we're the top quartile in the median income in the state of Massachusetts. We're not a Weston or Wesley, got it. But certainly we're fortunate as a town in the aggregate. And we should, and I'll use this word, exploit that for our kids, because we can. That doesn't mean just spend money because we can. You may recall the middle school building project, the position we took initially was, because it's there, we're not going to go spend that excess money. But when we learn what the rules of the bonding game were and everything, we worked very closely with the PMBC to at least obligate that money towards what made the best sense. And between the PMBC and the school committee and the administration, we came to a very good accommodation on how to best use that money. So I don't want to misunderstand when I say we do it because we can. We do it because a lot of this, we should be doing it, and we do what we can within our means. we think we're there.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm sure I'm not speaking out of turn for this board, that we share your pride in both your accomplishments and your aspirations for the school department, and even whether it's outside efforts like the Pursuit of Excellence initiative. Brian and I are participating in that to the extent we can, and I don't think there's anything we want to suggest up here that would tamp down any hopes you have to find newer and better ways to set the bar higher, and all of that, as it lands in this board is the context of dollars and cents, but the objectives aren't lost either. Do you want to summarize a little bit about what, I know you sent the slides out, but part of this is a public presentation too. I know there's some things, initiatives you have in the budget, whether it's restoring positions or the like, whatever level of detail you want to get into on that, any of you, please.
I'm going to ask Mike to help us there.
Yep.
So you want to take it away, Mike?
Yep.
And while he's getting these things put together there, we're a plus choice in, so one of the your revenues choices that was up there is choice.
Yep.
And that's been growing. 20 years ago, we were a minus choice. We're now positive choices. People from outside the community want their children to come to Littleton.
And how about another, on a similar note, another that we've tracked from time to time is sped and house sped. How's that? Is there any current trend line on that that you're?
Certainly the trend had been to pull folks in, and that's over the long haul of the last, I'm going to say, really in Diana Peterson's tenure. We've done a very good job. But now for a more micro, I'm going to ask Kelly to answer that.
I think we've done a good job of developing programs and offering programs when we have a critical mass to do so. When we look at a 5-year span, though, some of our students that are coming into our system or already in our system have some pretty pronounced needs that we just can't possibly take care of in district. And at this point in time, it's pretty early to tell where our costs are going to be, but so far so good for next year.
Mike, you?
Yeah, so based on the presentation that we did last Thursday, we talked about the biggest driver is the one Bonnie cited, which is the fact that we have to make up the step that we deferred last year. So that is the biggest driver for this current year. But we feel like that with the increased appropriation from the town, we're going to be okay in that regard, and we're not too worried about that. Some other considerations that we have is we are going to add AP chemistry to the high school, something that we've been thinking about for a while. We are trying to, if not necessarily expand, revamp the world language offerings, and we think we can do that. We think the AP chemistry one, which is included in the current budget that we have, that is a more significant financial impact than the world languages, but it is a couple things we're focusing on. The other big driver that we have to consider is
Just can you say where are you right now with in terms of the world languages, with what languages offered when and where you're trying to be? I'm just curious.
Well, we're currently offering Latin, French, and Spanish. We reconfigured our middle school last year, and what we're finding as kids are coming into high school now is that we have more and more that are preferring 2 routes in language rather than 1. So we're quite opting having students taking 2 out of the 3 languages to a level 4 or a level 5. We did experiment this semester with a Mandarin, introductory Mandarin, very inexpensive.
Really?
And last year we were able to strike quite a good deal, and we were able to rearrange that within the current budget plan that we have. A lot of schools throughout the United States and North America in general have gone into the Mandarin route a number of years ago, so we thought we would see how well it was received in Littleton. But I guess the major stressor that we see in the next 2 or 3 years is we have more students wanting to have a level 4, level 5 double language, which is great. So when they apply to colleges, it will look really good on their transcript. Plus, it's a useful 21st century skill.
I think Mandarin would be a heck of a lot more useful than French.
Pardon?
I would think Mandarin would be a heck of a lot more useful than French.
Well, we won't get into that debate publicly, but they all have their uses. But Mandarin is the second most spoken language in the world, and I think it was a good move on our part to to start introducing it within our school district.
But to your point, that's why we did want to get it in, because we do see the usefulness of it.
And what grade do you start foreign language?
Grade 6.
Great.
Another area that we're budgeting for is the educator evaluation implementation. This is something that's coming down the line. The state has put together a framework. We're in negotiation with the LEA about how we're going to implement it here in the district. This is a significant development in terms of primary and secondary education in Massachusetts and the United States, but it won't come without a cost. And what we're budgeting right now is $15,000, $7,000 for a software package that we would use to do the evaluations. And we also need to do some significant professional development. We have $8,000 slotted for that. We're also going to, we have budgeted currently a middle school science review. It's time for that curriculum to get a look taken at it in terms of, can we get that more in line with the 21st century. We have a very good science program and technology program at the high school. We've made some strides in the past few years. We've also done a significant revamping at the elementary level, and now we just think it's time for this building to have a look at that. We're also going to, in the current budget, restore club and activity stipends at Russell Street, which we had cut out, which is about $8,700. Those are the things that are actually in the budget that are somewhat restorative or new relative to what we've done in past years. There are a few other things that we have in there for consideration that are not currently in the budget, but as we go through the process, if there are opportunities, we would evaluate these types of things. One is a technology integration educational assistant, where you can see now the model is going away from the computer lab model and into integrating technology right into each classroom, in the middle of the curriculum. And it's new and it's cutting edge, and not all the teachers are up to speed on that, so we're looking for someone that can help integrate that. We have had a half-time middle school dean of students in the past. That's something we feel like would have a significant positive impact on that building if we could manage it. We feel like we could use another half-time secretary at the high school, again, related to some of the increased administrative load based on evaluations and things like that. If we had an opportunity based on some of the things that we did last year in terms of reductions, we would be interested in a full-time, about a half-time reading specialist and adding back 2 kindergarten ed assistants that we did reduce last year. And there is a responsive classroom, which is a character education program for elementary school children that is on the list of considerations. So those are the kinds of things that we're driving. Obviously, again, the biggest one is making up that step that we deferred. And then the second biggest one that we would look at that we absolutely have to deal with is that education evaluation implementation. And then the rest of it is just things we put on the list, because even if we don't do them, we want to know what we would do if we could, what we are missing if we don't. And, every year, we're reevaluating our allocation of resources and how we want to meet the mission. So we might reduce something somewhere in order to be able to do something somewhere else. When we have these kinds of lists, it helps us stay in the framework of why we're doing what we're doing or why we're not doing other things.
I know there's, I think we'll be looking for a specific description on the capital list, but before we move on to the capital, if there are any questions from finance committee members or selectmen on the operating budget topics that the school committee brought up, I mean, speak now.
One more feather in your cap this year. You've got a senior that got accepted to Harvard, I hear.
Yes.
There are a lot of good schools, but that's a particularly
Our students generally apply far and wide, and I'm very pleased with the accepted rates that they have. So the AP Chemistry, just so you're clear on that, is the addition of one class, and we're intending at this time to absorb it within our current schematic at the high school. There are startup costs, of course, for materials, so I feel pretty good about that we can actually absorb it within our current configuration.
And I'm going to ask Kelly to expand on AP in general.
Yeah.
Regional award and how we're doing with increased number of tests, scores, et cetera, please.
For the last 2 years in a row, we've been recognized as a high school that's been given an AP Honor Award. It's a national award. I believe around 440 schools out of 16,000 within the nation are recognized. We've been recognized for increasing the number of AP courses that we offer. and also recognizing the number of students that are taking them more correctly. This year, we are also recognized for the average score that they received. So we definitely have made some headway in that area. We're very proud of those accomplishments.
Congratulations.
Just to note, don't downplay your virtual high school that you have access to.
That's true.
So all your AP classes, or if you need to range in your studies, the students that take that, it's viewed very favorably as a student that looks beyond the context of our school system to look at resources beyond. So it seems to be very well received when students post virtual high school courses in addition to what our school offers.
That's a good point. We're very fortunate to have a good partnership with a virtual high school, and we have a deal worked out with them so that if one of our staff picks up a class, we end up getting 25 seats for our students. So far it's worked very well. We're currently offering this year 150 seats to both middle school and high school students.
I know we have the capital list, to shift to that subject, Steve Mark provided that to the body, we went over it. I don't know who wants to kind of take the lead on, thank you, Michael.
Yep, thanks.
Providing some background on that. That's the handout, here it is, okay. You want to walk through this, or does the board prefer to pick out items question?
I'd like
Okay. If you wouldn't mind, either TJ or Kelly or one of you folks that is able to just kind of give us a little tour of this list.
How about I take you down cursory, and then any question I can't answer, Michelle, we got Kelly and Steve here that actually provide that extra information you may wish.
Starting with, make sure everyone's got it. Everyone has the list of Dr. Okay, great.
Okay, and you can see these are in priority, so we talked about.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and then a little bit of justification that accompanies each one as to why we think it's a good idea. Okay, the iPad carts, I think you're familiar with it. In fact, it was a topic at town meeting last time. There was a few questions, and we think we answered them adequately that day. Why we began the iPad process, and this is a continuation of that contract where we're paying the lease costs. So contractually, we're obligated to pay the lease, thus the number one priority. Okay with that one? Yep. The Shaker Lane unit events, you know that's been an ongoing process. We've got about another 4 years. We've been placing them piecemeal each year through the capital budget, and we'd like to continue that. And we felt that it's important enough to keep it at that level. So that's the number 2 priority. And while Shaker Lane is, somewhat, everything's become an ancient history now, but, and as far as the 4 buildings go, it is now the oldest as far as any kind of updates, if you will, given that Russell Street recently went through somewhat of a renovation, or as we called it with the MSBA repair project. Okay with that one?
Yeah. I think unless anyone has any questions, if you do have any questions, I'll ask you to jump in, otherwise we'll let PJ run with it.
Okay, you're going to see 2 technology things, 3 and 4. The high school wireless, and then the system technology needs firewall switches, etc. They're both somewhat, well, even though we have wireless number 3, what number 4 is going to do is going to help that. And right now, it's a patchwork in the building at the high school to be able to do good wireless. As we looked at bringing out devices, because, well, there was a phase where no cell phones in school, and children were prohibited to have them. If it rang, you got to the principal's office, your mom's going to come pick you up. All those sorts of draconian measures were in place because it was a new device to us adults and how to use it. Well, as some of those youngsters now are becoming teachers themselves and very used to that sort of technology, we're also expanding our thought on how to use the devices. And BYOD, D, not B, bring your own device, is expanding in concept and usefulness so that it's seen. So that, but through a good wireless system to make that work well for us. And that's the reason in the high school we want to upgrade the wireless from what it is right now. And in general, and folks, Brian's going to be very familiar, when we start talking about switches and other technological enablers to those wireless systems, and the routers, et cetera. We need to work on that also as we're going through this. And thus, you can see, we're talking about replacing some aging hardware. And all of us, in fact,
Is that a system-wide?
yeah. In fact, I made the joke at the school committee meeting about maybe we were using some 386s. It wasn't quite that bad in some of in the Shaker Lane, but we are using, remember the word Pentium? You know, we all thought that was the cat's meow. I can remember that well. And now we know where we're at. And we're still using those. In other words, 10, 12, 13-year-old machines. Okay, the playground. There's numerous studies that play's good for kids, just in general. And our playgrounds are not where they should be. And it's not a 21st century thing. It has nothing to do with the century we happen to be in. It just happens to be that we're talking about 5, 6, 7-year-old kids, and they need equipment that's safe and that's rugged enough, durable enough, so now we're replacing it. And we do need to make some replacements. And that's why, and you can see, you know, out of everything, and you don't have a complete list, if you may recall, when I say not a complete list, this is what we prioritize most important to us, right, in understanding budget issues. That's why we came to you with a list that's at 280 versus 500 and change.
Just a question on
Yes, sir.
is this separate from, I know there was I know at Shaker Lane there had been an accident where a teacher had gotten hurt on the playground because of something with paving or something. I mean, this equipment is separate from that, from upgrading the...
Yeah, this is not the pavement program. That's, in fact, we don't even have that on here, Canada. The backyard, if you will, of Shaker Lane is all pavement. And that's been some time, and then certainly over the years, frost heaves, et cetera, have caused deterioration. And certainly Rich Faraday has brought it to our attention. It's on our radar. But I gotta be honest with you, it's a distant target at this point. So, very short answer, no, this is not addressing that, the specific tarmac.
Okay.
Anything to add on that?
Oh, that's fine.
The Shaker Lane bathroom stall divider, that's just a case of a little bit of age coupled with boys being boys, if you will, even at that young age. And we made the decision Thursday night, we don't want these things falling down, you know, for two obvious reasons. Certainly we want to maintain people's privacy, but then also we don't want the possibility of something falling on a young child. Your bathroom divider falls and leans against one of us as an adult, it's an inconvenience. A 6-year-old child could be injurious. So that's why that's there. And you can see we still have another technology. It's the cycle program, if you will, you know, just you're replacing older computers. You already mentioned some of the older ones. But you can see we put the 2 Shaker Lane issues ahead of it, because for us they were more important. As long as 3 and 4, the high school wireless and the system technology needs, those technology upgrades that we have down there at 7, are important. You know, if we have to draw the line someplace, we're plenty happy to draw it, where we keep the Shaker Lane stuff above it. You know, the painting floor tiles, you know, there's the broken windows concept, if you will. The efficacy of it, notwithstanding for discussion today, but certainly look good, feel good, be good. It's not a bad mantra in some ways. So we do want the buildings looking good. It helps instill pride that we'd expect in our own home. These are our homes, if you will. It's our property as town folk. So we want to, you know, maintain it that way.
And so I think the question, I'm not sure if it came up specifically to this item or not, but a question that had come up in the earlier review of the warrant, and I see that there's maintenance provided for in your operating budget. Is there a reason why this isn't a maintenance item?
Okay, Kelly,
I'd like to
jump
speak
back.
to that.
Yeah.
Through the years, in order to make budgets work, we've decreased those lines to make sure we had sufficient staffing in our schools. So this is an opportunity for us to catch up a bit. We are developing a 3-year maintenance plan that will help keep us on track as we move forward. So again, it's a catch-up. We're also utilizing our custodians on weekends now. They're in our buildings to not only be there if needed, but they actually have a list of things that they're going to work on during that time, maintenance-related things like painting, et cetera. So,
The high school boys locker room, bigger boys, stronger boys. And at that, let's just say it wasn't the most rugged of equipment initially installed when the building was built in 2001. So now we're at roughly 12 years or so of use, and hinges are broken, doors are missing, lock hasps are not there. So that's why we put that up there. And then you can see Russell Street Playground, it's for the same reasons I gave you about Shaker Lane. We want those kids being able to have good playtime outside also.
How old is that equipment now? I'm trying to remember when that was last addressed, the old shaker lane.
You may well have swung on those swings.
I thought we didn't address it when we did the last renovation of.
No, it was prohibited. It was not allowed expense when we did the Russell Street repair.
My sons were there, Russell Street.
Okay.
Heavily discussed, tried, couldn't pull it off well.
Yeah, all right, I just was kind of getting certain of my own children were talking about. Okay, any particular questions on the capital list, folks?
Just one question here.
All right, Peter has a question.
You have some tech refresh and modernization as part of this. Who helps you by keeping it up and running? Do you have like IT people that look at this new technology, or do you have?
That's an excellent question. We've actually moved out of the business of trying to have experts on staff. We're just too small, so we don't have a network expert anymore, but we do contract services. What we're doing is trying to make sure that the equipment we put in is tried and true, and has a sufficient longevity to it. To be quite honest with you, our movement to Apple-based products has made all the difference in the world in terms of having our teachers utilize technology in a way that is a sure thing. We have very little breakage or software defragmentation. It's made a tremendous difference. We do have expertise in-house, but not to the extent that they can manage the whole system.
So that would be bundled in with the cost of
Yes.
these capital improvements, it's assumed.
But this year, we did not, or we've used a minimal amount of money from our network company that we have partnered with, so it's a good sign at this point. But we are pushing the envelope with our switches and firewalls that are past their lifespan. We really need to take care of them before they take care of us, so to speak, and shut us down.
Service provider.
Pardon?
Provider that we do engage, that's not budget.
Yes, yes it is. No, it's in our budget.
I think you asked if that person or that company is in the capital request here.
Right, well, I'm seeing two things bundled together. If you're going to introduce new technology that you may not be used to using, or the people that have been maintaining current systems, you're going to see something new. Are we going to be able to maintain it?
In terms of training and...
training,
yes,
and keeping it up and running.
That's built in. We're using more and more the train the trainer approach, where we have people on staff that are certified, and then we have them train other staff. So we're fine with that. So personally, we don't have any concerns at this point.
In the Air Force, we call it two-level maintenance. There's people on staff that can do a certain, actually, a person on staff who can do a certain, and it's a limited. And now this outside provider, and that outside provider is in our budget, not as part of the capital expense requirement request.
Okay. And the other piece too is, I worry about software licenses or other items that may be required as you expand your capability. Do we have to worry about any of that?
Well, we're actually going more to web-based approaches, which is saving us a tremendous amount of money, and cloud storage, etc. So we're definitely on the right track in terms of being able to do what we need to do.
I assume some of those items we'll be able to identify in the line item budget when that's emanated later on in the process?
Well, we can. I mean, one of the things we're really working with this year is Google Docs as a main platform for our students to use.
What's wrong with that?
that's free, so.
Yes.
And if your question is as far as like a line item that's going to specifically address
Licenses,
Yeah.
I think it's traditionally there, right?
What's numbers that in there?
Well, that would be
This one's for
support,
licenses.
support services.
Because as you know, I don't think we mentioned it, I think you are aware, but just in case, you know, we had pretty much been going, when we presented, was by building.
Yes.
Kelly is instead now worked with Bonnie and some other staff. We have 8 cost centers now.
Yeah.
Right.
Versus building cost centers.
Yeah. I saw that in your slides that you sent out.
Something that's not on here, and thank Darrell for reminding me, is we discussed the high school hot water heaters.
Yeah.
They're approaching their life expectancy. Although I'll be candid with you, I would expect much more than 12 years. Nevertheless, they are. Right now, and Steve's researching this at this point, and we don't have a figure. In fact, when we looked at it Thursday, it was still TBD. And that is, do we replace the hot water heaters, the actual units themselves, or do we put flash heaters in where they would be needed? So we're trying to do cost-benefit analysis of that, see what's the best way to go. So we don't have an answer as far as money, but I would anticipate come next year, we'll probably be asking about that.
All right, before I transition, is there anything on budget or capital for the schools, questions, points to raise? The other 2 items we did ask you folks to talk about, actually, I know, PJ, you had mentioned you would welcome a dialogue further on the, the use of the funds, whatever we're calling reserve funds or whatever is part of the budget. I think it's understood that that's a part of your budget, but if you want any kind of dialogue on that, you want to put it on.
Well, we all understand, sometimes it's seen just as a reserve and leave it there, it's never be touched. Excuse me if I'm pedantic in this, and you're already aware of it, and I'll back off. Realizing that, especially with the special ed circuit breaker and all, before we become reimbursed, it's 4 times the average of education, ballpark 10,000. So we would have to spend 40,000 on a student before the circuit breaker even pops, so to speak. And at that, it's a percentage of every dollar over the 40,000. So it's not retroactive back to the beginning. So it's only that's at above. And in our time on the school committee, so these last 7 years, it's been down to 40 someplace. And Steve, what's the projection this year, please? 70?
This year it's 70%.
70%. So still, we will spend 40,000, and if it's 50,000, let's say, so 10,000, we're gonna get 7K back on that. So we would have spent 50, reimbursed 7, and the other child, we would have spent 10, and that would have been it. So, now, that money that comes back.
Come on up front, where you belong, Fred.
So that money that comes back through circuit breaker, we will spend, and realize it's a year in arrears. So it's, so now we're talking about 14. So what are we doing this year in 13? That money goes now into the circuit breaker fund for 14. And our expectation is, in our practice, and if we're not doing ranges in that, is to spend that for the needs. So in essence, some of the costs that we're spending this year, the revenue is here this year, but we earned it last year. But
There's also the requirement, you have to.
well,
It's a legal requirement.
and then, yeah, there's a limit as to how much, we could try to, stuff away, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, when the question's raised, it's like, not only is it appropriate to use it, I mean, that's kind of why a lot of it's there. I think the bigger question's more on long-term sustainability of the, the funds and the whole system, and probably, fortunately, I think it's fair to say that there's nothing urgently at issue in what we're looking at for FY14, correct me if I'm wrong, Bonnie, but it is, it's an ongoing thing we're gonna all want to keep an eye on, maintaining the integrity, the balance, the safety balance, whatever.
Well, 13 was certainly a constraint year, as we all are aware. And we did certainly use a good portion of the revolving funds. But now, there were heavy expenses this year also. And thus in 14, you can see that the revolving fund is actually going to be better than it was this year because of the expenses. So while there was less money available for us to spend, there were more costs, and that's what made it so tight. And we had, certainly ample discussion last year leading into the budget. And this year, we can see that this discussion is, I'd say, very different. That sense of urgency that we all had last year, I mean, we still share, the sensitives properly. But I don't think we're near as nervous, if that's the right word to use, as last year.
Yeah, it's between having it being a contract year and being some expense surprises, that adds a lot of anxiety to the mix. Whole different flavor in the room tonight than there was a year or so ago, which is good.
Does that answer for those for the funds?
For my part, yeah, I think the other context that came up here, and this kind of speaks to just the presentation of budget documents, is I think it'd be important to show the town and important for town officials too to see a presentation of the documents. I know Steve had debuted something back in whatever it was, December, November when we met, which shows the whole picture, when you include the outside spending, spending from other sources and in the town budget. And I just hope we can kind of reach a common ground on that so that.
I think you'll see a lot, and I wrote back to you all after that meeting to try to explain at least where I failed that evening to articulate it, at least properly the way I felt I wanted to. Hopefully the letter helped a bit more.
Yep.
There's certainly some areas we have no control over, and we really would rather not be the ones who present that. Neshoba Valley Tech High School is an example. We have no control of it, nor do we think we should have any. So we don't think we should be the providers of that information, if you will, that comes from Neshoba Valley Tech to the town and is dealt with. OPED, while certainly very important to us, the retirement healthcare system, we don't directly engage or manage that. And we think the people that do routinely engage and manage it should be the ones that present it to you all. So I think that if, I know I wasn't clear that evening. Hopefully, intervening discussions, the letter we all sent to you, and what I'm saying right now helps narrow that gap as to what your expectation management is and thus ours.
I think those are fair points. I think just at the end of the day, there's kind of two trackings we have to keep in mind. It's tracking the part we're responsible for in terms of town appropriation, and then there's, that's part of a bigger picture, from various sources, and it's important to know overall where all the money's being spent and being able to look at it and understand it.
And I believe Kelly's approach too is that those 8 centers, cost centers, work collaboratively with Bonnie and others in finance, is going to help, I think, scratch your itch, if I may.
Okay, all right, well, that's good. I don't want to beat that subject to death. The other 2 items that are on the agenda for our joint meeting I think are less driven from the Finance Committee, but are topics that all 3 boards are have an interest in. First off is the middle school project balance. And do you want to speak to where are we at? Do we need to do something proactively?
No, as of now, the equipment, the testing equipment is on the generator now, and I think that's going to be done next week.
Yeah, so the electrical contractor came in.
For those who aren't aware, could one of you 2 explain what the issue is here?
Why don't you explain about the bulk?
We have $200,000 burning a hole in our pocket, which we have to expend as our auditor has advised us, because we borrowed more money than we needed to complete the middle school project. We are obliged to spend those funds. Nevertheless, we are obliged to spend those funds on the middle school.
Right.
And since we haven't done so now, we need to do it post haste. Fortunately,
by the end of this fiscal year, is that right?
If not before, yeah. Fortunately, and it was quite fortuitous that at the meeting when we discussed this need to spend money, unbeknownst to the group, we had a separate group that was working on the question of how can we get a backup generator so that we have at one of our school facilities, so that we have a bona fide shelter location that we can call on in an emergency. Well, that costs money. How much does it cost? Well, here's $200,000. And so we're looking right now, and I'm not sure how much of that is needed for that purpose, but that's the
expectation that there'd be a warrant article for special at the annual or something like that? Or
no, it has to, we're authorized to, we have a town meeting vote authorizing us to spend money on the middle school.
The existing vote is broad enough to all
that's needed, yeah.
And so the town needs another shelter besides the police station?
Well, the background is, and maybe Alex could talk more to that issue because he was on the working group, but we don't have a generator backup sufficient to provide all of the power that we need at whatever the facility is for a shelter. We have, it'll turn a set of lights on, but it won't run, some basic equipment and stuff like that. There's been a real dilemma regarding a shelter, that we can put people in a space, but we can't provide all the services that we would like to be able to provide at that space because there's not enough juice. So
the short answer is no.
What we're hoping to do, excuse me, is that it's a wiring issue and not a capacity issue. That's why we're having the testing done now.
Yeah, if I may.
Does that make sense to you?
All I was asking was that we typically have the police station as the shelter, and I was just asking, does the police station, is it missing this capability?
No, you're misreading the term shelter. The police station is primarily the Emergency Operations Center. It is a warming center and a cooling center for small numbers of people that do not stay an extended period of time. The emergency plan for the town has the middle school as the primary shelter. It's not practical to open that shelter for 10 people.
That's all I was asking.
Okay.
And God forbid we never get to.
What happened was, during the hurricane, we realized that we were even in trouble at the police station because we had the domino poles go down, we lost power. We moved to the shelter and prepared to open up a shelter and realized that the power in that building was at the best rudimentary. In other words, the building had lights, that's it. And so that's what prompted the study.
Just asking.
So roughly $200,000, speaking round numbers, it was determined that was acceptable for the actual cost of the building. Now, some of the things that happened too to cause that, perhaps, because some people say, well, how could you not have figured out how to spend the $200,000? Okay, I was on the PMBC for a good part of the middle school construction. You may recall, as we were digging and cleaning up the old building, we struck asbestos. Too bad it wasn't oil, but it was asbestos. And initially, the mitigation for that was not allowed by MSBA. So we were sucking up 100% of that as a town. And there were a few other items that, at that time, MSBA said, no, those are disallowable. In the interim, as we went and finally closed the books, and I'm sure Bonnie had some hands in this, working well with the folks out there, some things became allowable. And thus, when the final accounting came through, well, popped $200,000, more than we anticipated. And when it became established that the money had to be spent because of the rules with the bonding and everything, and that the PMBC still held the reins on the money, because town meeting voted them to expend it, we coordinated with the PMBC and worked with them to establish what we thought was a good list. We worked it through them. The shelter was our number one priority as a school committee also. Is what can we do to help make that middle school a good shelter for the town, for the reasons Alex just brought up. The generator, or at least, let's put it this way, emergency backup power was addressed. To answer a question that may be already burning in somebody's mind, well, why aren't the current generators powerful enough? They're powerful enough to run the building and keep it operating, but not all the things that you would want to be doing during an emergency shelter operation. And thus more power, because it was not envisioned, nor would have been allowed, even under MSBA rules back then, to have built it as a shelter, so to speak. So the shelter was number one priority, the generator was number one priority for all of us. That was easy. Right now, $50,000 out of that 200K is put aside to address it. As been mentioned already, Griffin Electric, who were the electrical subs that put the electricity in the generator in originally, are running a test for us, and actually the PMBC more accurately, to find out what's the load, what is the load, how does it all go, and do an analysis and an assessment as best they possibly can as to what increased requirement to meet the needs that the emergency folks here in town have come up with. Here's what we want our shelter to be able to do. And we're going to close the gap based on, is it a new generator to increase the power output, or is it just a redistribution of some of the outlets and circuits inside the building? So the latter is the easiest, if you will, and the previous, my first statement is the most complex.
You had me at, we need an emergency shelter.
Okay. So I just didn't know how much depth you want to fall. Now, for that 150 remaining, so to speak, is we went through it with the PMBC, as I said, and they all agreed, after we presented justification and everything to them, as to what we thought it was a good idea, and that it would fall within what we all felt, you know, in good conscience, within the rules, as to how we can spend that money.
Great. Anyone have any remaining question on that subject?
I apologize for coming in late, but to take a step back, what was the trip point that got us to the place that we're in now, which is having 150, 200,000 in our hands that we have to spend, rather than saying, oh, wow, we've got $150,000 that we can either pay down the bond, or, I mean, what
Great,
got us there?
yeah, great question. That it's because we used to borrow more money than we needed on the project. We don't do that anymore, so the circumstance we're talking about won't get repeated. For example, when we completed the Russell Street School project, we went out and permanently borrowed only after we closed out the project and only for the amount of money that we needed. And the prior practice, to my understanding, might have been to actually borrow the amount that was authorized in the article, and then to spend what you needed on the project and to have the additional borrowing authority left over to do what. I defer to the financial officers, what their predecessors may have had in mind there. But what was clear is that we could not use it to pay down debt. That what we were being advised by by the auditor is that the people who bought the bonds expect that we are spending that money on the project that they purchased. So
that's the.
So we can, so legally, when the IRS ruling is that we can only spend the money on the project itself and not on, retiring the debt of the project.
So if this was figured out before we bonded, we would have been able to just reduce the bond by the
Yes,
150?
yeah, if we were following then, the process that we're following now, we would not have borrowed a penny more than we needed to pay off the bills.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Couldn't the state change how they reimburse us also for the school projects from like a lump sum, it's now a lump sum up front
Well, yeah,
versus?
it's a different example, but I get, if we haven't said it in front of FinCom before, I want to tout that Littleton was the last community that got in on this great program that the MSBA had, and Steve was right on top of it and sharp enough to know that here's an opportunity that we can go from getting our annual payments, that we're borrowing the full amounts and they give us our annual payments that reduce our costs each year, that instead they gave us a one-time payoff and said go and refinance, and that ended up saving us about $200,000 a year for 10 years. So that's, it's like $1.9 million that we will not having, that we won't be spending in over a 10-year period.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the last tripartite subject I had here is really one that I think the FinCom's interest is more just in oversight. There are a couple of instances that show up when we're doing budget reviews. One is with the highway, one is with Park and Rec, that there are some shared resource, and this is a topic we've talked about with the schools. And we're not trying to point fingers at anybody, just trying to come up with a system that makes sense so that everybody's dealt with equitably. So I don't know who wants to take the lead on that, whether, I know we don't have either.
Should we have highway or rail?
Yeah, no highway, okay.
So there's no issue.
Let me answer it this way and see if it does it for you. Board of Selectmen, Park and Rec, and School Committee have signed, and I don't know if you've seen that agreement or aware of it. And that may be helpful if we provided you a copy of that agreement, so some of those shared resources.
Is this a recent?
Should be last year.
Okay.
I think it might have been last.
And I mean, we were talking about this subject last fall when we were meeting jointly.
Yeah.
And actually, it took us because we worked so quickly, the three of us got together, it only took us 20, 22 months to get it done.
Right.
So we're pretty proud of that.
The fast track.
Yeah, it's fast track. But you guys think that'd be helpful, if we at least provided that? It might answer the
Absolutely.
concern?
Yeah, I'll send you I've got it online, I'll send you the link.
It wasn't all about being fair, it was also just having visibility.
Yeah.
To what is the cost really of doing this when it's spread across 3 different budgets?
Right, yeah,
So we
it's tough
see it.
to,
That was, I think that was as much, Brian, that was your P, wasn't it, Brian?
Just want to say.
Do you think that'll answer the question?
Yeah, it's
Well,
one of
there's
those,
other things, though, that
thank you for that reminder. It's one of those niggling issues where it's tough to keep track of the big picture when you're tracking the costs in different areas. So, if there's a clear agreement, and this is on both parties or
I
just?
think the agreement is just on what the reimbursements and there's no, dollar.
Responsibilities.
Yeah,
No, it doesn't say,
There's no budget
There's no
attached.
budget
It's not
amount.
budget.
So to answer your question
Yeah.
is, to have a separate line, maybe, across the three budgets of
I don't
highway.
know if it lends itself to that, the document so much, but. Is this on both, by the way, the document you were referencing, is that both Park and Rec and highway? Is that
no, it's just
item?
Park and Rec and
Just
the
Park and Rec.
school department.
And select.
Well, the selectmen signed it on behalf of
Highway.
Highway.
Okay.
Yeah.
This
I don't
is,
know.
this is typical in every community, and we call them in-kind services, and for the use of our buildings, we get plowing done, we get ground maintenance done, and, from my point of view as a superintendent, I think it's working well. I haven't sat down and tried to sharpen a pencil to track the pennies, so to speak. I just think you have to view yourself as one community.
So from an operational point of view, you don't perceive there's an issue, and I guess if that's the
No,
case,
I mean,
then from a bookkeeping point of view, Bonnie, is this thing handled as best as it can be in the reflection of the budget?
Yes, I mean, everything is adequately reflected in the budget. It's just a matter of who gets assigned the burden of care in certain cases, so. And I think that agreement has now been agreed to, so.
Okay,
Yeah, it was last March, and I'm sending you the link.
okay, great.
But when we met, when we had that marathon meeting, it did not appear to be settled. and-
Somebody was not
And we had Park and Rec saying, oh, but we're being burdened with this and that, and
It always comes back to field maintenance, and that's always the bone of contention with the highway and Park and Rec and schools and who's paying for what, so. I think it's a good idea to kind of get it out there, because
because when we had it
I
out, they
think
meet
there's
with
still
all the...
questions out there in regards to,
Yeah,
the rules are in there, but
We didn't
dollar
make this
cents is-
issue up. It came.
No, I think the issue goes to monitoring the framework in this agreement, because the agreement sets up the rules. What it does not have, there's no attachment that says, all right, here's how the costs are apportioned.
Correct.
And here's we've agreed on what the rules are, but this, you'd have to look to another document, which we certainly can generate, which would,
Allocations across departments, money.
yeah, well, it would indicate,
Big accountant full employment
because the
program.
discussion we had on that Saturday budget meeting is that we all ought to know whose budget it's in.
Right, but
You know, we
Brian was
have to-
indicating about, this issue
Yeah.
surfaced earlier when Park and Rec was in here looking for some of the additional, or the restoring of their funding, or whatever iteration it was in at that point. This was one of the things they did indeed cite, and it's, some of the burden of costs associated with the shared resources.
I think the issue maybe, if I can, is not so much an accounting line. It's, as we negotiate back and forth, so to speak, and let's use field maintenance as an example. The school department uses 50% of the time, Park and Rec uses 50% of the time. So it should be 50-50. Well, the 50% of the time, the school's using it, it's very light use. When Park and Rec using it, you get 100 kids on it instead of 10 kids. I'm using just absurd examples to make a point. So we do go to negotiation as far as whether or not it's going to be $50,000 or $40,000 one way or the other. And I think that may be it. I'm only thinking I understand the meeting you're speaking of, and it was, I don't know if it was your meeting or a Board of Selectmen meeting, and Park and Rec did make a case about funding. It wasn't a joint school committee meeting with them that I
You
recall.
were at one of our meetings, I think, last summer when they were here, and that was probably it.
Yeah.
Peter. Yeah.
So I think the issue may be more as to how do we negotiate with Park and Rec perhaps?
Yeah.
Is that a fair characterization?
Well, Yeah, to a degree. I think the issue is, do we have sufficient money to take care of some of these things in the budget? I mean, we can go back and, you know, do some
To the
pencil
extent that it's a
calculations.
management issue, it's really not our business, so we're just kind of, you know, it bubbles up in the context of people's budgets.
Because I just don't know, we were just trying to, I mean, as taxpayer, I sort of don't care who's paying for it as long as it's paid for, you know, and the fields are properly maintained and all that kind of stuff. But we keep hearing, oh, we don't have the money to do it. And then we talk to, I mean, from what we've heard, it doesn't sound settled. Your document notwithstanding. That's not what
The
we're
document,
hearing.
the MOU is a rules.
Yeah, it's the process
It's a
document.
process document.
But
There's no financial
Right, at
tie-ins.
the end of the day, we still, I mean, there's a lot of things we do around here that we know what the process is, but we don't have the money, so we don't do it. Or we don't do all that we might want to do.
Well, at the moment, it doesn't seem to be a relevant issue in the specifics of the line item budget for FY14, but I guarantee you it'll pop up again.
Absolutely will. Absolutely will.
All right, as we swing into just the selectmen FinCom portion of it, and by the way, I think we've already covered a lot of the topics that came up earlier in Bonnie's presentation. I know everybody's watching the clock, we all want to know what the Bruins are doing.
State of the Union. And the service isn't good in here.
But before we shift on to school, at the risk of doing this much too early in the process, I want to say the cooperation and the presentation of your objectives from the school department. We set a task of trying to tackle the budget earlier. I think we're the beneficiaries of both good luck and good work from our financial team, and you folks have played into it. We're at a point, I'd say for some of the grayer beards around the room, that we usually aren't at this early in the process, where I think, you know, the end is in sight anyway. I mean, there is an operating deficit that could get worse, you know, it could get better. We don't know what your final request is, but based on your preliminary draft, you know, it's something we can live with, I think. So a lot of that speaks to cooperation all around, and I just want to applaud everybody on that. Selectmen bought into starting the process earlier. You guys have been very cooperative, so you know, didn't want to miss an opportunity to give thanks when there's no yelling going on in the room. So.
Yeah. When is the school committee scheduled to vote the budget?
21st of March.
March 21?
But they did unveil a draft.
Oh, that's fine. But the 21st, okay.
Yeah. All right. As far as the selectmen priorities, I think most of the priorities you folks identified are incorporated in the operating budget. We also went through the capital plan priorities, and I believe Bonnie communicated to you guys last night that it was our intent, at least through discussion, that seeing some of the bigger ticket items down the pike coming at us in terms of you know, potential new library, potential new fire department, that we might want to pump the brakes a little bit on some of the capital requests and this is townwide, not just for schools, but you know, that we want to be mindful of bigger capital needs, and if we can store some of that money, either through a dedicated fund in the stabilization fund or whatever means you identify, you know, that's kind of the consensus intent without any specific vote having taken place. Peter, would you want to add something?
No, they want to add anything. If you think you're done with the school and you don't need any more, I'd like to let Kelly and Steve go.
You're welcome to head on out, whatever.
We're working hard.
Yes, appreciate it. You're welcome to stay, but you're also, don't take offense if you leave. Was there anything else, Bonnie, on the budget? I mean, I think you covered it, I think, already.
I mean, the group health is you know, they're going to have their budget on 21st. By March 11th, or hopefully shortly thereafter, the town will be in a position to review what the group health renewal rates look like, which will be a significant bit of information in knowing how we're doing and reducing that budget deficit. I mean, we're optimistic.
Good.
Just to speak to your rainy day fund for capital. It wasn't discussed last night. I think the board was very receptive to it. Just, it's too early right now. We're gonna have more further discussion on it. What's it gonna look like? How's it gonna be responsible? Who's gonna be responsible? But I think the board was very receptive to some type of process to kick that off, so.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The other thing we talked a little bit about was the, how to handle funding getting to the 3% in the CPA. And sort of the capital got sort of enveloped into that, and one of the things we were very clear about was that we didn't want to take the capital money and commit it to, your idea of reserving the capital money, it wouldn't get put into CPA. I think that was a safe assumption. But the capital money was not off the table as far as consideration for, if we want to try to fund CPA. But it wasn't an automatic mechanism that linked the two.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair for me, I don't think it characterize anything what we talked about before as coming up with any specific proposal, just kind of identifying that as a general direction we want to go, and a specific proposal is what I think we ought to.
And we did have the unfinished business that we had talked about prior to the November special town meeting. We essentially agreed we weren't going to bring any policy changes on use of cell tower funds to that town meeting. We had, but that if we did it, it would be at the annual town meeting this year. To that extent, then we're going to have to re-engage with the Light and Water Department because we haven't had those discussions yet. They had their eye on the cell tower funds. We had our eye on the cell tower funds potentially, it's stated in one of the selectmen's goals as a potential source of CPA funds. Since we're spending it on open space now, wouldn't it make sense to put it in CPA first, get 45 cents on the dollar, and then spend it on open space? So, but we haven't worked that through yet, and need to do that.
But I think we're all buying into the idea that we want to fund that to the maximum so that we get the 45 cents on the dollar when we can get it. But, where we take it from, that's a little more difficult question.
Right. Well, the specific, where we take it from, at least in the context of this year's budget, was being driven by the identified target number available for capital requests versus the request list, and that delta there, and that's, at least that's where the conversation started.
Yeah. I just wanted to, follow up on the whole idea about the capital stabilization fund. My first assignment in the public sector, which is the next town over, big projects were funded out of the stabilization fund. And, we're not set up to do that here because the stabilization fund is as our emergency reserve. But I guess what I'm saying is what makes sense is to create that stabilization fund for big projects, a capital stabilization. So I agree with the concept.
You've been around in one form or other long enough, Drew, you might remember that we actually have used stabilization specifically that way here. We did the high school with that, and we did a lot of the open space purchases before we had CPA and before we, even before we had the cell tower funds. We were salting with a lot of money. Steve, you probably remember, it was up like $5-6 million or more in either or of those accounts.
I just wanted to say the specific suggestion that Bonnie brought to us was that, frankly, in addition to the stabilization fund that we use under our policy, that we might also want to create...
You're not off the hook yet.
That we might want to create additional stabilization funds, which you're allowed to do and do it for particular purposes, and that if we have money left, and it's the decision you make from looking at 5 or 10 years worth of needs, and you see you better start squirreling money away for the big ticket items, and that may be a legitimate trade-off to say, okay, we've got $1.4 million this year that we could spend on capital, but maybe we're choosing not to because you know, if we chop off 200,000 on the list this year,
You know,
and put it in the
if you find
fund,
next year's
then we'll
list.
have it, then we'll have that to go towards the bigger
Right.
ticket items later. So that, I mean, that's a different wrinkle on how we would have typically viewed it, but it's, you know, it's something that comes out of looking at the long-term needs. I mean, and it's worthy of exploration, I think.
The other related topic that I brought up in our discussion of the capital list was, and this is really a broader topic for the overall budget process, is how we handle, for want of a better term, like budget orphans, those either spending priorities that don't have a department promoting them or whatever. And sometimes it's open space that falls in that category. There's no open space department that gets asked for a budget. In the past, it was the track. While, you know, the school runs it, it wasn't, you know, entirely the school's project. It was a citizen petition. And I, you know, we had a bit of a dialogue on that, and I welcome more input on that about, you know, how to make sure that the budget process isn't exclusively reflective of what staffed departments want and otherwise provides for what the community wants, you know,
Thinking out of the box.
Yeah, well, we from time to time run into those issues, so rather than just having them land in your lap, you know, provide for it.
But all the more reason, and I mean, I think an answer to that is all the more reason to find what money we can put aside.
Right.
Up to 250,000 in order to get 45 cents on the dollar from the state through the Community Preservation Fund.
Hey, 4 out of 5 years we're in crisis mode, so it was one of those rare opportunities where we can entertain discussions like this.
Well, and it pays off for us.
Huh?
If we find it, it pays off for us.
Right, yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
that's better than any bank's gonna pay, so.
All right, the next joint topic that it's come up a couple of times, and again, I want to stress that the Finance Committee's interest in, and this is on the development projects, the 40B, believe me, we don't want to revisit your lively discussions of recent weeks on that, but we, whether it's that or the point where we are interested, however, on how, you know, if there's a, you get your arms around it, I think you have, the financial impacts both in terms of cost to the town and revenue stream. I know some of that's reflected in the...
Yeah, certainly in the fire department presentation, I'd have to say, from the major developments that are going on, are largely going to have public safety impacts.
Beyond what we're
not to the exclusion of public works, but that, you know, the 190 new housing units will have some increase in, you know, the number of ambulance calls or the number of police calls. Both chiefs have taken that into consideration in general terms of some of the planning they've done. The fire chief in particular, with, you know, unveiling his staffing plan for heading towards a full-time department, allows us to better address those issues. I know some of the planning that the police chief has done as well is mindful of that. Neither one is going to kick in 2014 for sure. That the status of the 15 Great Road 40B proposal is that the Zoning Board of Appeals votes this Thursday night to issue its decision. Their draft decision indicates that they will be approving the 40B for 190 rental units. Along with that, the Board of Selectmen approved a host community agreement last night, which has a couple of things to say about it. One is that it is the mechanism by which we're getting some mitigation funds out of the developer. It's been widely reported, the numbers, depending upon what the ZBA does, what the planning board does, what town meeting does for approval of the comprehensive permit, of a subdivision plan, and of easements that are going to be brought to town meeting for action. The potential revenue is up to $1.2 million as a one-time payment. It's not a recurring revenue. The other significant thing to know about the host community agreement, though, is that there's language which would essentially, if the ZBA decision gets us above our 10% goal under 40B, which it does, it would take us from 8.45% up to 13.97%. So we will be well above our 10% goal. Why? Because we get to count all 190 units because they're rental. Those are the rules. If they're rental, you get to count them all on your subsidized housing inventory. If they're owner-occupied, you only get to count the affordable ones, which would be 25%, which, by the way, would only take us to 9.8% if it were an owner-occupied. So we're lucky it's rental. And we saw that, but we want to get above 10% and stay above 10%. The agreement the Board of Selectmen signed last night will keep us above 10% through the year 2031. And that's done by our mutual agreement of what, and the way we're doing that, by the way, is because it's only every 10 years that the denominator changes the way the 10% is calculated. And that's by your decennial census. It only changes, right now we're working with the 2010 census, which said we have about 3,400 year-round housing units. That's the denominator. Our numerator is 291 affordable units now. That's about to increase by 190, which will get us way above. The next time the denominator rather changes is in 2020 with the census. We've made the estimate that the denominator will be 3,900 units. That's what we currently have. Plus, we've been doing about 25 per year, and plus the 190 units that are being created. So it takes us, and then we round it up. So we're assuming that we've got about 3,900 housing units as our denominator. The town will be responsible for maintaining the existing units, the 291, and making sure that they stay on the list. That's why it will be important to monitor and maintain those units and make sure none of them drop off the list, or if any of them do, that we replace them with other affordable units. On the developers' part, they are guaranteeing that well, first off, the ZBA, as I said, will condition this as a rental project, all 190 rental, even to say so in perpetuity. Problem is, in perpetuity only lasts until the next time the developer or their successor comes back to the ZBA and says, can't make a go of it with the rental, I have to do owner-occupied. And then they are obliged to entertain that application. They're not obliged to approve it, but they're obliged to entertain it. And what we do know is that the appeal then goes to the Housing Appeals Committee at the state level, which almost never supports the town, and almost always supports the developer. So mindful that rental in perpetuity doesn't mean that. The selectmen have signed an agreement which will provide the guarantee that we need for as long as the 2020 census figure is valid, which is through January 1, 2031. So the obligation of Omni would be to, if they did come back subsequently and convert from rental to owner-occupied, they would be obliged to have the count result in our staying above 10%. So as a contractual, as part of that contractual, and I think that's unprecedented. I was telling some people at the State House today about it, some housing folks, and no one else had done that yet. I think we may be the first ones to have done it, but it will keep us above. What it means is that we will be effectively immune from unfriendly 40Bs for the next generation, and that is huge. And so the unbridled growth that comes from a 40B, we think we can stave off. It will require vigilance, though, to make sure that the affordable units on the inventory stay affordable. And there's no reason not to do that anyway. But that's sort of the bigger picture of where that 40B comes in. The approval that comes on Thursday presumably won't result in, it'll be a number of years before the units roll out and that they're, fully occupied. On the other major development proposal, Sam Park was in front of us last night for an update on his 90-acre development. He's looking to be able to have a soft open of his phase 1 by this fall, he said. That he's looking to have some vertical construction going on this season and have something open by the fall, but the official opening for the phase 1 would be next spring, the spring of 2014. The uses that would be included in the phase 1 would be retail, restaurants, at least one package store license, and that the future phase 2.
Possibly a hotel in phase 1.
Yeah, right. And if the market bears it, it may be a hotel
Possibly
as
a
well.
hotel.
So keep an eye on that one, and we're all very hopeful that comes in the earlier phase. The later phases would be more of the entertainment uses, theater, and as well as some.
Spot parlors? Oh, no.
Sorry.
That was our last meeting. We almost had a recall because of that. That's fine.
Sitting here on
Well, on both of them, I appreciate both, I think I speak for everybody, we weren't, I don't think we felt entitled to that level of detail, but we appreciate it. I think the more mundane issue we kept running into on both sides of the ledger book was, I think, back to December 1st and the budget presentations, Deputy Police Chief King mentioning, the parking lots at the point are going to necessitate traffic accidents and break-ins, and we're going to need more police officers. And I'm not picking on him. I'm sure it's prudent on his part to look ahead, but have we had any kind of comprehensive look on impact on costs beyond just anecdotal or individual departments addressing that? The other part, of course, is on the spending side. When we talk about the point, I know those numbers have been built into the revenue projections we have, but boy, it would be nice to pull them out and show the world, because mentally they get spent about 10 times over. But
any of those things, I mean, this is when I would think our policies would help us.
Yes.
And that those one-time, revenues we get spent on one-time things, maybe we could balance that against, maybe that could be the initial funding of our capital stabilization.
Yeah, well, there will certainly be recurring revenues, we hope, that in a couple of categories. One is the new growth, the gift that keeps on giving, because it's a permanent increase in your ability to.
But the growth factor is only 2.5% once it hits the books, right?
No, it's the growth factor is, and I would defer to Bonnie on whether the projections. I'm assuming the projections that we saw earlier are lowball estimates of what the development that we know is on the books.
Right.
Well, I guess what I should have said is once the development, in whatever number it is fully built out.
As it gets built, it gets taxed.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But
the value
once it comes online,
the new growth value
property
increases the levy capacity. The other category is whatever the is like the meals and the rooms tax, which we know the meals tax right now, having practically no facilities in town, or few, is $60,000 a year. When we have more, and Sam has plans for bringing many,
at least 3,
that we would see that number go up, and we'd certainly want to see, we'd all want to see a hotel here with the room tax revenue that would bring.
But realistically, we're not looking at anything before FY16.
15.
Yeah, 15 maybe.
15.
You might get nickels and
Yeah.
dimes,
15.
but you're not gonna get anything meaningful before 16.
You'll see an increase. What that, you'll see an increase, you know, what that increase will be, you know, it's gonna be significant, I think, just not,
Right, not.
16, I think, 16.
In all likelihood, though, those increases will be how we balance the budget from those costs that we've already identified.
Correct.
You know, group health costs, you know, things that are growing faster than 2.5%. Those costs, you know, that the new growth and the room tax and the meals tax would be ways to keep those increases from being more injurious to us.
an expansion to departments that you were saying earlier, Paul, you know.
Well, that's just the point. Well, what are should we start asking for 5-year, 10-year plans from departments? I mean, I know the fire department debuted what they're looking for this year, but we just saw budget models that presume, 2.5% growth in operating budget, the other operating budgets of the town, right? No?
No, 0% in operating, 3.5% in step increases, that might be.
Okay, fine, well, I guess, yeah, okay, but in any event, those don't anticipate new police officers.
No, they do not.
Right, all that.
Right,
kind of
I mean,
stuff.
there are three gorillas. Two of them are public safety, and one is the schools.
Schools, right.
You add 190 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments, you're gonna have a bunch of kids, and.
If you guys, you must have already had
The
some.
the saving grace is that David Hale says it's not going to cost us anything more, so
Okay.
Yeah,
we're counting on that.
To your point about we've spent it 10 times over, I think perhaps Omni has been able to save us 10 times over. How's that? With some of the projections, who knows what they are. But to the students, we actually.
I didn't mean you spent it 10 times.
No, no, no,
You know.
But we can speak a little bit, yeah. if you
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I can speak a little bit to the students. Now, these are not precise numbers, because they're going to vary by town. Chuck actually did quite a bit of homework roughly 2 years ago on this, and even previous to that, I had done some homework, totally disassociated with Omni, as to what might it be as we look at growing numbers of children. We're pre-K through 12, so let's just call it K through 12, there's 13 grades. You know, what we may get in the number of children, we have one town that it's 0.45 per bedroom, another was 0.75 per bedroom. That's the number of children may come in. So what do we want to use? Certainly single-bedroom apartments, we don't anticipate, don't know, but that 3-bedroom, yes. And as that 3-bedroom number fluctuated like this, it certainly had our attention a little bit. Just straight line distribution, K through 12, so 13 years. If you get 100 kids, you can do the simple math. What are we talking about, 8.5 or so kids per grade? Now, we know it's not going to be straight line. There's going to be peaks and valleys, and one grade's going to get spiked more than another grade. In fact, what our experience is now in the way school class distribution goes, 120, 125, maybe 135 starting in kindergarten, but then you see our high school graduations are about 100, because roughly 10% of our kids go to other schools in the high school age, for the most part. That includes parochial, charter, some choice out, but as we say, we get choice in. And that choice in, we've got control over that. In fact, Kelly and I had a conversation about choice, and one is, do we do it because we can? Or do we look at it as, let's build that business, if you will, and see how we can increase. And that was very much off the cuff discussion between he and I, and it was only this past week. And the thought was, we want to keep level. So how do we do that? We do this with choice. And so ballpark 1,600 kids in our system. And you see that's been fairly level for many years now. Again, you get a little bit of this, but all in all, 1,600 is a good number to go with. So now, let's say there's 100 kids, and we get some of those spikes. Well, we have to get a teacher for a particular grade, yeah. Where I would see the biggest potential would be Russell Street. That's where we seem to have had some bunching. Now, what they've been able to do, fortunately, is move teachers around so that maybe the 4th grade has 4 classes or 5 classes, and the 5th grade 4. And then the following year, because of the way this bumps around, 4th grade is the fewer classrooms, in the 5th grade now the more, because those children move through. In the elementary schools, we have that luxury because the teachers have elementary certification. So so 3, 4, 5, they can teach that. When we get into the high school now, the specialties, whether you're an English teacher, history teacher, physics teacher, whatever, that becomes a tad bit more problematic in how we move around. Now, where we're, I guess, fortunate, if you look at it this way, student demand drives a lot of what courses we offer. And when the student demand drops, and frankly, let's say we got 25 kids in a particular subject area that they really like and enjoy and it's going well, and the following year it's 15. Boy, you'd love to offer for the 15, but we may have to look at it and go, can't do it, because we've got 25 that want, and that becomes the trade-off. And we ran into that last year on, because while we kept the core curriculum for sure, and actually strengthened it with math, we did look at what's the student demand. So we will have some unhappy folks, students and parents, because it'd be their class that they're very much interested in that may suffer from this. I don't see it as catastrophic. I think it's wholly manageable. There is supposed to be certainly some tax increase to the base. How does that get distributed?
It's comforting to hear that, because that's,
Yeah.
the fear is that,
And I know,
just the opposite.
and certainly I can be you up, but and you guys can jump in. I can be you up, but I really believe only on the margin. I don't believe, and I can't tell you it's going to be 100 kids, 120 kids. I don't know that answer. I can't tell you it's going to be 80 either. Because when he finally settles down, he'll be an Omni. Is it how many 3 bedrooms is going to be the main driver, and then how many of those kids will come to our schools that actually populate the bedroom, so to speak, and then that we put in the schools. Is that a fair assessment from your perspective, guys? Yeah. Good news is I've been wrong before, so. But sincerely, I think we know how to manage it.
But at the same time though, Paul, it's going to change the balance sheet a lot, because if we do start, say 80 kids come into the development there and we displace the 80 choice in, that choice in funds that we're getting is going to disappear off your revenue line, and then it's that, how many times was it counted in the budget that we're assuming is going to flow from the other part of the budget? I think that's where your budget risk is going to manifest itself.
Good point. All right, on this topic, we thank you for the updates. I think it's important. I mean, obviously, if you're coming across, I mean, if there's a financial analysis of the agreement you reached, by the way, I think would be interested in taking a look at that on the 40B part, and any of the potential impacts, revenue or expenditure, please let us know sooner rather than later.
I think at the town meeting, we'll have a better sense as to the whole package.
Yeah.
And once that does, then we'll be able to make decisions.
Yeah, we can certainly be developing that stuff for you in the future.
And make the departments, I hate to encourage it, but to invite them to look in 5-year terms, because that almost invites growth where it doesn't really happen. But if it's gonna happen, I guess we probably need to project it. The other topic I had on for the joint meeting of the Selectmen FinCom has to do with policy and bylaw updates. Back when we met in September, I know we brought up the subject of the financial guidelines, and I think we do a great job of covering the topics that are addressed in our financial guidelines, but there's a lot of topics that aren't, that have come up at various times, whether that's doing financial analysis of union contracts before they're adopted, whether it's oversight for departments that use reserve funds, and it's not just you guys who get mine on that, it's Park and Rec is a heavy reserve fund user. It's the TIFs, whether there needs to be any criteria involved, and how to all that. Memorializing some of the budget process calendar things that we instituted this year, which for the most part have worked out pretty well, but I think, I forget the name of the organization, Bonnie, but I know last fall when a number of us went to the conference for the finance committees, they recommend having, kind of a published book for FinCom members that everybody knows. You update your calendar, which I think we all live by, but having something, a more broader document that everybody can tap into is kind of the budget process guideline would be helpful. So anyway, there's a number of little topics out there, and in conversation yesterday with Greg Champion, who's not here, Selectman Chairman, we settled on a suggestion for the boards is to perhaps have a subcommittee, a couple members of the FinCom, a couple members of the Selectmen, to work with Bonnie Keith, the finance team, to review, which is our charge, the existing financial guidelines, and then identify or come up with language for some of the other identified areas that we think might also. Sure.
It might be helpful if maybe Steve and I do an update of that.
Yeah, Ted and Greg were the ones who were
Very interested in taking over.
volunteered for
They and I volunteered for it. They told us they wanted to do it.
You got
Some of the things.
That's how I got elected president of Littleton Rotary one week. I missed a meeting next year.
Which, by the way, you need to come back 7:15 tomorrow morning, bud.
Tomorrow morning, I'm busy then. But in any event, there's a number of little topics. We talked about it, maybe we'll circulate a memo with some of the identified topics. If anyone thinks of any others that we should look at. And this is not a board of criticism. I think the things that we have memorialized in guidelines serve us well. And there's just other financial topics, budget topics that I think would benefit from. So,
And Ted and Greg appreciate that too, I must say.
well, I don't know how burdensome it would be. As usually the case is, we'll probably show up and then identify topics from paid staff to go home and work on. Anyway, I hope we'll get that off the ground. I don't know that there's anything so pressing that we need to have a target date as for this annual town meeting's warrant. I don't think so. I mean, I don't think there's anything necessarily that would have to be a budget warrant article, rather just adopted guidelines.
Yeah, I don't think that, I don't think we'd have anything. The warrant will close on March 22nd.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned last time that, did I say April 12th was our publication deadline? If I didn't say that.
Yes, or Bonnie
for the
forwarded it
town
to you.
report, yeah.
And that's,
For the
just
town
keep in
meeting
mind, there's two
report.
different reports. That's for the mailed out.
That's the mailed out thing, which includes your report.
Right. The earlier deadline, which is February 22nd, is for the town report, right?
That's right, yes.
Yes,
that's-
all right, which, we are scheduled to meet on the 20th, although it's going to address the FinCom on that. I've got a personal conflict on that. Not the 26th, what's our next meeting? 26th? 27th, maybe? It's 2 weeks from tonight.
I think we're ready to go.
26.
Yeah, 26.
Well, if we have to miss that deadline by a day or two, I don't know.
Oh, you miss it by a week if you like.
All right. But I'd like to, everybody should have a copy of, you can go on the website and find it, by the way, last year's town report. What I'd ask everybody to do is, on the FinCom that is take a look at the language there, see if there's anything you want to add to it, and I'll work, as I've said I would before, on a draft update for the town report. The other report we have more time on. Any other joint topics that you guys want to address? By the way, for financial guidelines, maybe it's not a bad idea to have somebody from the schools too. I apologize for having left that out of the discussion, but if you'd like to have a seat at the table or so, there's no reason you can't.
Let me see. Mike? Yes.
Well, Chuck missed the whole meeting, so.
That's fair.
Oh, he's got a writing assignment coming up.
We can probably wrap up our remaining work here, guys, quickly. The website update is this. Peter and I met with, oh, by the way, you guys might be interested. Peter Vilkins, one of our newer members, took it upon himself to come up with a pretty ambitious program of projecting a lot of financial data from the Finance Committee, as well as other documents in a new format, which we're going to try to use our page on the town's website to display. And Peter and I met with Bonnie and Nancy Glencross last Thursday. She did send an email at the end of the day that she's got most of it up. And there's the way of accessing it that I won't, it's still in kind of beta form, so maybe I'll circulate the access point, everybody can take a look at it, and I'll broadcast that part. I don't know if we can sex up the numbers, but at least we can show more of them and make them more
Numbers are
current.
very exciting.
Always more current, more transparent, all that kind of stuff. And
It's actually a very cool site.
it looks good. If you haven't seen it yet, we're taking a look at it. So there's that. Town reports we've addressed. Marilyn's not here tonight, we don't have minutes. The other thing I'd ask, back to that the committee, I'd like to get off the ground and working on that. As far as the policy and bylaw update review stuff, I'd like to suggest myself, and I wanted to twist Chris's arm as the next likely chairman, although I don't want to preclude what might happen. If the board doesn't have any objections, have us two serve. If anyone wants to dive in, we'll be soliciting input along the way and circulating drafts.
Do you need a motion?
Probably, yeah.
So moved.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded.
Before we actually close, today's February 12th.
Hope you're feeling better, Keith.
A lot of what we're able to do today because of the president, today, President Lincoln.
President Lincoln, yes.
So certainly, I think it's worthwhile recognizing that.
Yes, great point. Jack Homer have a real estate office up in Littleton, and he had a picture of President Lincoln meeting with his captain. He pointed that out to me, and I sat there, and of course, Jack and I were, on opposite sides of the political aisle, although great friends and neighbors, and I said that was the last great Republican. Might have a couple Republicans in the room, I'm guessing, given the response I got. Motion's made and seconded to nominate, I guess, myself, Paul Glavy, and Chris Hinckley to serve as FinCom reps on a subcommittee to review policy and bylaw updates, financial policy and bylaw updates. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. I'm waiting for that other motion.
Close.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn over here. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Signify by saying aye. Okay. Just shut the camera off. How's Chris's foot?
She's still pretty sore, but she's doing better.